The voicemail came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember the exact time because I was still up, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of decaf, watching the snow come down over the backyard. 32 years I'd lived in that house. I knew every creak in the floor, every draft that came through the basement windows in January. That house was mine. And then I heard my son-in-law's voice through the phone speaker, and something inside me went very, very still. Leonard, that's what he called me. Not Dad, not even Mr. Holt. Just Leonard, like he was my boss. I've been meaning to say this for a while, and I think it's better I just come out with it. You've been mooching off us long enough. We carry you around this house like you're some kind of guest who never checks out. Priya and I have talked about it. It's time you found your own place. We need our space. I sat there for a long moment. The snow kept falling. My decaf went cold. I didn't call him back that night. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just went upstairs, got into bed, and stared at the ceiling for about 2 hours. And somewhere in those 2 hours I made up my mind. My name is Leonard Holt. I'm 64 years old. I worked 31 years as a surveyor for the provincial government, and I retired early when my wife Sandra passed away from ovarian cancer. That was 3 years ago now. Sandra and I had one daughter, Priya. We raised her right here in Kingston, Ontario. Good schools, hockey lessons on Saturday mornings, family dinners every Sunday. We were proud of her. We still are, in some way. Or at least I am, despite everything. When Priya met Evan Marsh in her late 20s, Sandra and I were cautious but hopeful. He had ambitions. He worked in commercial real estate, always talking about deals and projections and passive income. He was the kind of man who filled a room with his voice. I noticed early on that he had very little interest in listening to anyone else's. But Priya loved him, and Sandra liked that he seemed stable and motivated. We gave the marriage our blessing. For the first few years things were fine. They lived in a condo downtown in Toronto, doing well enough. Then interest rates started climbing and Evan's commissions dried up faster than he expected. They had 2 kids by then, my grandchildren, Owen and May. And in the spring, about 18 months after Sandra died, Priya called me on a Sunday afternoon. Dad, she said, we're in a bit of a rough patch. Evan's between things right now and the condo lease is up in 2 months. Would it be okay if we stayed with you for a little while? Just until we get back on our feet. I want to be honest with you about something. I said yes partly because I was lonely. The house felt enormous without Sandra. I'd go whole days without saying a word out loud to another person. The thought of having Owen and May running around downstairs, having Priya at the kitchen table in the mornings, I wanted that. I genuinely wanted it. So they came. And at first it was fine. More than fine. The kids breathed life back into that house. Owen was 5 and May was 3, and they thought Grandpa's place was the greatest adventure on earth. I'd make them pancakes on Saturday mornings the way Sandra used to make them for Priya, with blueberries and a little lemon zest. And they'd eat them standing up because they were too excited to sit down. Those mornings were good. Those mornings I don't regret. But Evan. From the very first week, there was something off about the way he moved through my house. He'd come downstairs in the morning, help himself to whatever was in the fridge without a word, sit at the kitchen table with his laptop and his coffee, my coffee, and treat the whole place like a co-working space he hadn't been billed for yet. He never offered to help with groceries, never once asked if I needed anything from the store. When I hired someone to come fix the eave screws in October, Evan stood in the driveway watching for 20 minutes, and then went back inside without saying a word. The money started about 2 months in. Evan came to me one evening while Priya was putting the kids to bed. He stood in the doorway to the living room with his hands in his pockets, and this slightly sheepish look that I later understood was entirely calculated. Leonard, I hate to ask, but we're a bit short this month. The timing with the move wiped out our buffer. Could you spot us $2,000? Just a bridge loan until my next deal closes. $2,000. I said yes. The next ask came 6 weeks later. $3,000 that time for car repairs and a dental bill for May. Then $1,500 for something to do with a registration fee for a course Evan was taking online. Each time he'd say the same things. Bridge loan, next deal, getting back on track. Each time I said yes. Because Priya would look at me with those eyes, the ones that reminded me of Sandra when she was worried. And I couldn't find it in myself to say no. Over the course of 14 months I gave them $37,000. I kept a note in a small book I keep in my desk drawer. Dates, amounts, what it was supposedly for. $37,000 to people who were living in my house, eating food I bought, with the heat I was paying for running all day, while Evan sat on his laptop pursuing deals that apparently never closed. I also want to tell you about the grocery situation, because I think it says more than anything else. I did all the grocery shopping. Every week I'd drive to the Metro on Division Street and come back with 4 or 5 bags, enough to feed everyone for the week. Evan and Priya both worked by that point, She'd gone back to her job as a physiotherapist, and he'd picked up some kind of consulting work. And not once in 14 months did either of them offer to cover a grocery run. Not once. I didn't ask them to. That's on me. But I noticed. I noticed, and I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they were rebuilding. I told myself this is what family does. My father told me once that you never lose by being generous, and I held on to that maybe longer than I should have. The first real warning sign came around month 10. Priya and I were having coffee one morning. Evan was still in bed, as he usually was until about 10, and she mentioned, casually, that they'd been looking at houses. Oh, I said. In Toronto? No, actually, she said. Here, in Kingston. There's a nice neighborhood near the lake and the prices are better than the city. She paused. We were thinking if things work out, maybe we'd want to stay in Kingston long term. Close to you. I thought that was lovely, I told her so. What I didn't understand then was what she meant by close to you. About 2 weeks after that conversation, Evan came to me with a different kind of proposition. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table with his laptop open and this brisk, businesslike manner he sometimes put on when he thought he was being impressive. Leonard, I've been running some numbers. This house is worth a lot right now. The Kingston market has done well. I think there's an opportunity here for all of us. What if Priya and I bought into the property? Like a shared ownership arrangement. We could put in, say, $40,000 over time, take a formal stake in the house, eventually transition to full ownership. You'd have financial security, and we'd have stability for the kids. Everybody wins. I looked at him for a moment. This is my house, Evan. I know, he said, waving his hand. That's why I'm proposing something structured, formal, legal. It would protect you too. I don't need protection from my own house. He laughed a little, that laugh that never quite reached his eyes. Just think about it, he said. I did think about it for about 30 seconds. Then I put it out of my mind. But something shifted after that conversation. Or maybe I just started paying closer attention. I noticed Evan had stopped saying your house and started saying the house. Small thing, but I noticed. He'd say things like the thermostat in the house runs too cold, or we should really redo the bathroom in the house. That we. That casual proprietary we. One evening in January I came home from a walk to find that Evan had moved some furniture around in the living room. My reading chair, Sandra's actually, the green wingback she'd had for 20 years, had been pushed into the corner to make room for some oversized sectional they'd ordered. I stood in the doorway and looked at that chair, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something I didn't have a name for right away. I moved the chair back the next morning while Evan was still asleep. He moved it back to the corner 2 days later. We didn't discuss it. Then came the Tuesday in February, the night of the voicemail. Evan Marsh had gone out to dinner with some colleagues, or so he said. Priya was visiting a friend. The kids were asleep upstairs. I was in the kitchen with my decaf in the snow, and my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Evan's number. I've already told you what he said. What I haven't told you is what came right after. He kept going. Look, I know this might come as a shock, but Priya agrees with me. We've been talking about this for months. You've had a good run here, Leonard, but this is our home now. The kids are settled, we're settled, and honestly, this arrangement isn't working for us anymore. There are some nice senior buildings over on Princess Street. You should look into it. Senior buildings on Princess Street. He was 51 years old and had paid not 1 cent of mortgage or rent, and he was suggesting I look into senior buildings. In my own home. I played the voicemail back 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the table and sat there for a very long time. I'd like to say I came up with my plan in a flash of inspired clarity. It wasn't like that. What actually happened was quieter than that. I just understood, finally and completely, that I had been teaching these people, without meaning to, without ever wanting to, that there were no consequences for how they treated me. That every time I absorbed something I shouldn't have had to absorb, I was writing them a permission slip for the next thing. And there was always a next thing. I didn't sleep much that night, but by 5 in the morning I was at my desk, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The first call I made was to my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Devereaux, who's been handling my family's legal matters since before Priya was born. I'd already had a conversation with Patricia the previous fall. Not about this specifically, but about estate planning, about the house, about what my options were if things with the current arrangement became complicated. Patricia had walked me through the process without me having to spell it out. She was that kind of lawyer. When I called her that Wednesday morning, I told her I needed to move forward. She already knew what that meant. Under Ontario law, my situation was a bit particular. Evan and Priya weren't tenants in any formal sense. They had no lease, paid no rent. They were what's sometimes called occupants by permission, which meant the rules were different. Patricia told me I needed to give formal written notice requiring them to vacate. She recommended 60 days given the children and the season, but said I could serve it immediately and it would be legally valid. I said to serve it. Patricia drafted the notice in 2 days. In the meantime, I made some other moves. The loan book I kept in my desk, $37,000 across 14 months. I had Patricia formalize into a demand letter. Every date, every amount, the stated purpose as I had recorded it. The letter stated that the loans were due in full within 90 days. It was sent by registered mail and email simultaneously. I also called my financial advisor and had a long conversation about the house. I wasn't ready to make a decision on that yet, but I wanted to understand my options. I walked out of that call with numbers I hadn't expected. The Kingston market had done even better than I'd thought, and what I'd paid off over 32 years was worth considerably more than I'd let myself think about. That information sat in the back of my mind and I let it settle. On a Thursday evening, I sat down with Priya and Evan at the kitchen table. Evan had his usual half-attentive expression on. Priya looked nervous in a way that told me she'd known this conversation was coming. I said, I want to talk about the voicemail. Evan started to speak. I held up my hand. I've had some papers prepared. You'll each receive a copy tonight. There's a formal notice of vacating which gives you 60 days from the date on the letter to arrange alternative accommodation. There's also a demand letter for the money you owe me, which is $37,000, and which I'd like repaid within 90 days. I paused. I've tried to be fair with the timeline. I think 60 days is more than enough time to find a rental. There are good options in Kingston and in the surrounding area. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Evan laughed. That same laugh. Leonard, come on. You're not serious. I am. We have kids here. You can't just— Owen and May are welcome to visit me anytime they like, I said. That doesn't change. But you and Priya are adults with incomes and this house is mine. I think you knew this was coming. Priya's eyes had filled. Dad, we're your family. You are, I said, and I love you. But family doesn't leave each other voicemails suggesting they move to a seniors building. Not in a house they haven't paid $1 toward. Evan tried several more angles over the next 2 weeks. He questioned the legality of the notice. Patricia had to send him a brief email clarifying his options, or the lack thereof. He suggested mediation. He brought up the children twice as a kind of soft threat, implying I'd see less of Owen and May if I went through with this. I wrote that one down too. What he did not do was apologize. Not once, not in any form. Priya apologized once, quietly, on a Saturday morning when Evan wasn't in the room. She said she'd known the voicemail was wrong. She said she'd told him so. I looked at her for a long time before I said anything. Then why did you let him send it? I asked. She didn't have an answer for that. The 60 days passed slowly and then all at once. About 2 weeks before the deadline they found a rental. A house in Napanee, which is about 40 minutes west of Kingston. Reasonable size, decent neighborhood. Priya texted me the address. I wasn't sure why, but I appreciated it. Moving day was a Saturday in late April. I stayed upstairs for most of it, which I'm not sure was the right instinct, but I didn't trust myself to stand in the kitchen and watch Evan carry boxes past me without saying something I couldn't take back. Owen came up to find me around noon. He was 6 by then. He climbed up beside me on the bed and said, "Grandpa, are you sad?" I told him I was okay. I told him we'd still have pancake Saturdays. He seemed to accept this with the total faith that 6-year-olds have in the adults who love them. And that about broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. They left around 3 in the afternoon. I heard the truck pull away and I came downstairs. The kitchen looked the same. The living room looked the same. Sandra's green wingback was exactly where I'd last moved it. The corner had become its permanent place by the end, and I found I didn't mind anymore. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in it. What I discovered over the next few days was less okay. Priya had taken a set of curtains that Sandra and I had put up together. Cotton ones with a small blue pattern that we'd found at a market in Prince Edward County years ago. They weren't expensive. They were irreplaceable. One of the bathroom cabinet doors had been pulled off its hinge and not mentioned. There was a long scratch along the hardwood in the hallway, new, and deep enough that it wasn't an accident. I took photographs of everything and sent them to Patricia. The demand letter for the $37,000 had been largely ignored. Evan sent Patricia a letter through his own lawyer. It turned out he'd found a lawyer, disputing the characterization of the funds as loans. He claimed they were gifts. He used the word goodwill gestures twice. His lawyer's name was on letterhead from a firm in Belleville, and the letter was about 2 pages of creative interpretation. Patricia's response was 4 pages. She referenced the dates, the amounts, the written records I'd kept in my notebook, and 2 text messages Evan had sent me in which he used the phrase, "I'll pay you back, and once this deal closes, you'll get this back, Leonard, with interest." That second one in particular was very helpful. I want to be honest about something. Going to small claims court is not dramatic. It is slow and administrative, and there's a lot of sitting in hallways. Evan showed up the first day with his Belleville lawyer, and the same expression he used to wear when he was explaining to me why a deal was about to close. The lawyer made arguments. Patricia made arguments. The adjudicator, a calm woman in her 50s who had clearly heard versions of this story before, asked Evan directly whether he had ever used the phrase, "I'll pay you back," in correspondence with me. Evan said he didn't recall. Patricia submitted the text messages. The adjudicator ruled in my favor on 31,000 of the 37. The remaining 6,000 was on amounts where I hadn't kept clear enough records. Patricia told me this was a good outcome. I was inclined to agree, though I did spend a few evenings thinking about those $6,000 and where they'd actually gone. During all of this, the notice period, the move, the court process, I had also been talking quietly to a real estate agent. Her name was Donna, and she'd sold 2 houses on my street over the past few years. I'd watched from a distance and been impressed by how she handled things. I called her in March, just to have a conversation, and we talked for about an hour about the market, and about the house, and about what I actually wanted my life to look like. What I told her was this. The house had been right for the life Sandra and I had built. It wasn't right for the life I was building now. 32 years is a long time to live somewhere, and I wasn't leaving lightly. But I was 64 and healthy, and the equity in that house was an opportunity that didn't come twice. There was a smaller place I'd seen advertised, a stone cottage about 12 minutes outside of Kingston, near Sydenham, on a piece of land that backed onto the lake. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, a dock. My father had taken me fishing on that lake when I was a boy. Donna listed the Kingston house in May. We had 3 offers in 9 days. I took the second one. The damages to the hardwood and the bathroom cabinet, I deducted them from a security deposit that Evan and Priya had never actually paid, since they'd never been formal tenants, which meant Patricia had to get slightly creative about how we characterized the offset. In the end, I simply applied a portion of the small claims judgment against the repair costs and called it settled. Donna said I shouldn't let it eat at me. She was right. I moved into the Sydenham cottage on a Friday in July. My neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Clifford, came over with a bottle of wine that afternoon. Actually, I should say my new neighbor, a man named George. Actually, his name was already in the file I should not use. Let me simply say my neighbor. A quiet man in his 70s who grew his own vegetables and had strong opinions about the proper way to winterize a dock. We talked for 2 hours on my new porch. It was one of the better afternoons I'd had in years. Owen and May came to visit the following weekend. I'd bought a small canoe, nothing fancy, a 16-footer I found secondhand in Gananoque, and we took it out on Saturday morning with fishing rods and a bag of sandwiches. Owen caught a smallmouth bass and was so thrilled he screamed and nearly tipped us into the lake. May refused to touch the fish but consented to being photographed beside it. That evening, after I'd dropped them back with Priya, who had been cautious and quiet with me but not unkind, I sat on the dock with a glass of rye whiskey and watched the light go out over the water. The loons were out. They have a sound that does something to your chest, those birds. Something that makes you feel like you're in exactly the right place. I thought about the voicemail. I thought about Evan's voice saying the word Leonard, the way a landlord might say it to a difficult tenant. I thought about Sandra's curtains, which I hadn't been able to recover. I thought about those early Saturday mornings with the blueberry pancakes and Owen and May standing up, because they were too excited to sit. Some of those things I'll carry differently. Some of them I won't quite get over. That's the honest truth of it. It doesn't all resolve clean the way you might hope it would. But I was sitting on my dock on my land, looking at a lake I'd known since I was a boy. The rye was good. The loons were out. The court had ruled in my favor and the money was mostly recovered, and the house on Princess Street, in a city full of senior buildings, according to Evan Marsh, had sold for considerably more than anyone expected, including me. There's a thing my father used to say, up at this same lake, when I was maybe 9 or 10 and just starting to understand that the world didn't always go the way you hoped. He'd hand me my fishing rod and say, "You can't control the fish, Leonard. You can only control where you put the line." I put the line in the right place, eventually. It took me longer than it should have. I know that. I let too much slide for too long because I confused kindness with permission and generosity with a lack of limits. I gave Evan Marsh $37,000 in a year's worth of groceries, and the warmth of a house I'd spent 32 years building. And he thanked me by leaving a voicemail suggesting I look into senior buildings on Princess Street. But here's the thing about fishing that my father also knew and never quite said out loud. Sometimes the reason you didn't catch anything for a long time is that you were in the wrong spot. And sometimes, when you finally move to the right spot, everything starts happening at once. The loons went quiet around 10. I finished my rye and went inside. I left the dock light on, because I like the way it looks from the bedroom window, a small circle of gold on the dark water, steady and unhurried, going nowhere. That's enough for me now. That's more than enough.